Welcome to the Fubar Digital Lounge. Holy crap, we're actually doing something.
I know. It's been a hot minute.
It really has been. The last time you heard us, we weren't called the Fubar Digital Lounge.
Indeed.
The Heterochrome Media Podcast.
Yes.
That really confused the algorithm.
It did. The algorithm did not like that name.
Do you think the algorithm will like this name?
No. But it'll like it better.
But we like it.
Yes, that's important.
And that's what matters.
Yes.
So, what are we gonna do? We got alcohol. We got Coors Banquet here, and what do you got?
I got a Yinzarita.
What is a Yinzarita?
It's margarita in a can. It's Pittsburgh themed.
How's it Pittsburgh themed?
It's got black and gold on the can.
And
it's made by a company in Pittsburgh, I think. Otherwise, it just tastes like margarita in a can. It's good.
Straightforward. When he grabbed this off the shelf, I asked, "So is this gonna taste like a pierogi?"
That'd be cool if it did, but now it just tastes like a margarita.
Bummer.
I like it though.
In addition to that, we also got our cigars.
Yes, we're smoking Alec Bradley Project 40.
Really good stuff.
Very good stuff. Very good burn on these.
And I am Redoubt, aka Spencer.
I am a humble collector, aka Connor.
We tell you both our fictitious names and our real world names because we try to use our fictitious names, but once the beer hits, that kind of stops.
Yeah, it just goes out the window.
Stops. And we are history buffs.
Yes.
We both have YouTube channels relating to history. Myself, Redoubt, I focus on the 18th and 19th century, particularly American military history.
And I, a humble collector, collect items from World War I and World War II.
And we've decided, we've been wanting to do this for a while, to get together, have some nice drinks, enjoy a good cigar, enjoy the wonderful, humid as all hell outdoors of Western Pennsylvania.
This is the most humid it's been all week.
And, yeah, we totally plan this, right?
Yes, always.
And we've wanted to get together and chat about history. We've had a few people request it from our respective channels, just get together with drinks. But we really just haven't had the right ambiance, the right atmosphere. Or to be quite honest, just we've been lazy.
Well, yeah, time. I feel like we've been lazy and busy at the same time.
Yeah, so we're rectifying that today, or we're going to try to the best of our abilities. And as I tried to relight my freaking cigars...
Oh, it went out.
It already went out. We're having fun. Humble Collector, tell us what we're going to be talking about this fine evening. Because every time we get together with our libations, what we're going to do, we're going to discuss a historical event. And it's by no means do we say this is a historically accurate account of these events. But man, will be an entertaining one. So yes. What do we got? Our maiden voyage. What do we got?
So we decided to go with one of the craziest stories from history that we've found out about across the years and have enjoyed. This is the story of the Second Pacific Squadron in the Russo-Japanese War. It is a story that some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not. This story has a lot of twists and turns. It begins... trying to figure out how to phrase this.
It is quite the mess, isn't it?
It is quite the mess, because the Second Pacific Squadron started out life as the Baltic Fleet, and
that's your first sign.
That's your first sign of a problem, because the Baltic and the Pacific are very far away from each other. We also touch on the Russo-Japanese War, which really doesn't get covered much in Western history, but it's actually very significant from a historical standpoint. Russia just constantly takes L's throughout that entire war because they underestimated the Japanese, and the Japanese took very good advantage of that. But we both read different books, and you read this book and I think a different book as well, correct?
No, so I actually read a book with one of the best titles you can ever summarize this whole story with, The Fleet That Had to Die. Now, this for many years was the go-to reference relating to the Russian Second Pacific Squadron. I should state it was written in the late 1950s, and it was written by an author who opens the book by saying, this is not a story that we care about history with. Really? So he has a disclaimer to start, like this is not the most historically accurate source, but this is a true story. So take that as you will. And he claims that his sources were all primary sources left behind by the officers and the crew of these naval vessels. And that was really the main measuring stick to tell this tale. So I am definitely coming from a bit of a dated lens, but man, when you got a book titled "The Fleet That Had to Die," you kind of have to take it up. But that's what we're going to try to balance out when we do these videos. We're going to try to do different sources so we can see some So we'll see what sort of discrepancies occur. So what did you end up reading?
So I read The Battle of Tsushima by Phil Karidas, and this book came out relatively recently. If I go to the copyright page here, copyright 2020. So a relatively new book.
During the dark times.
Yeah, during the dark times.
The times we're not allowed to talk about on the TubeU.
Yeah, it's interesting because it talks about the journey of the Second Pacific Squadron, but it also starts out significantly earlier. It does a good job of setting the stage for why the Russo-Japanese War happened and everything that led up to it. And then it spends a good amount of time talking about the titular Battle of Tsushima itself, and then a little bit about the aftermath. Because Tsushima is a very significant naval battle, and it's one that most people have just never actually heard of.
Particularly in the Western Hemisphere.
Yes. Well,
without any further ado, our story begins in 1904 in a part of present-day China, the Liaotong Peninsula, if I'm not mistaken. Or did I already mess that up?
Yeah, Liaotong, yeah.
Wow, I'm pretty proud of myself.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
good on you.
Especially considering this is Redoubt Productions here, who can barely speak the English language, let alone any other foreign language. So, we'll begin on the Liaotong Peninsula in 1904. And, well, this peninsula has been fought over by many countries in the preceding years. The surviving vestiges of the Qing dynasty from China, they've been trying to fight for possession, but they're imploding, so they really can't do much to keep China together, which allowed all sorts of international powers to move in and claim China, particularly the Manchuria region, for their own.
Yes.
And Manchuria got all sorts of valuable assets. And one of them, particularly the one that Russia wants, is timber. And I kid you not that this whole mess began because a logging company from Russia moved in and claimed the region as their own. And they are about to almost start a world war. Almost. This doesn't become quite a world war, but it does bring the world closer to it.
So it's interesting as well because Japan technically won the Liaodong Peninsula at the end of the Boxer Rebellion. But then the European powers came in and bullied Japan into giving it to Russia.
Well, they'd actually won it before then. They'd won it during, I think, the first Sino-China War.
Is that 1894? Just have 1894 as the date.
Yes.
Here. Okay.
Boxer Rebellion in 1900.
Yep. Oh, yeah, you're right.
The problem was the Japanese and other foreign countries had all claimed that region. They were trying to keep their control, and they had this uprising, so they made an 8-team alliance. Boxer Rebellion's batshit. It may even be more batshit in terms of allegiances than our story today.
There's a really good song that goes over the...
There really is.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the 1890s, Japan had moved up the Korean Peninsula, moved into Manchuria, moved onto parts of China, and claimed this Liaotong Peninsula for their own. And by the way, to have this peninsula gives you an open seaport into the Pacific Ocean. Anything further north is going to freeze in the winter months, which is why you want control of this peninsula. Remember that. But as Humble has told us, the Western powers got involved in the region later on and basically convinced Japan to give the region back over.
Yep.
And kind of have it be a neutrality zone where everybody can equally share it. Equally.
Nobody's gonna... We're all equal here. Just some of us are more equal than others.
So yeah, Japan's already fought a bloody war for control over this region, and then through negotiations had given it back over to a neutrality zone, which the Russians are now exploiting for all that lovely, lovely timber. And in addition to the timber, why else? I'd already mentioned, why else do they want this peninsula?
Well, you see, Russia has this problem, is that most of their ports freeze every year. And so that nice port into the Pacific would be a huge boon for the Russian Empire. Nicholas has these great ideas of becoming a bigger, better empire.
The Tsar at this point.
Yes, the Tsar at this point.
The last Tsar.
Yes, the last Tsar. He doesn't know that yet. That's a surprise tool that'll help us later. But funnily enough, prior to him becoming Tsar, back when his father, Tsar Alexander, was still in charge and alive. It is Tsar Alexander, right?
Dude, I live in the United States.
All right, I think it's Alexander. Anyway, there was actually a lot of talk in Russia about essentially like teaming up with Japan, because Russia considered themselves to be a European and an Asiatic power. Japan was a rising Asiatic power. You know, they're kind of coming into their own at this point. And so Nicholas, in his younger years, was sent over to Asia to kind of go on this tour and make friends, basically. And he actually was quite impressed with Japan. He actually saw a lot of potential future for working with them. And then he almost got assassinated.
By a freaking samurai.
Yes, he was going through, I can't remember the name of the town, but he was going through his town with his cousin George. who at first I thought was King George, but no, different George, different cousin George. And Tsar Nicholas gets out of his rickshaw, and the samurai runs up and tries to kill him. Nicholas is able to block the sword with his arms, but it does leave a nasty scar that he will carry for the rest of his life. George, at this point, hops out of his rickshaw with his cane and attempts to fight off the samurai, who decides it ain't worth it and starts running, at which point the 2 rickshaw drivers tackle this man, and police come and promptly arrest him. However, in this moment, Tsar Nicholas has decided that he now hates Japan and the Japanese people, and that he just can't be friends with them. They're all horrible people.
Quite literally, that samurai, when he nearly drove his sword into Nicholas, drove the racism into him.
Maybe the sword was enchanted with racism. Maybe that was the whole plot.
Maybe it was a sword of PGT Beauregard.
Maybe it was.
It could have been.
It could have been. But yeah, and to be fair, Japan did literally everything in their power to apologize to Nicholas and make this better, to the point that the Emperor himself personally visited Nicholas to apologize. And again, this is the Emperor of Japan. This is quite literally, as far as the Japanese people are concerned, a god. He doesn't go and talk to people. He doesn't apologize to people. And Tsar Nicholas, despite this incredible honor that he's been given,
all the people to apologize to.
Yeah, he's just like, nah, I'm done. He does end up giving a pension to the 2 rickshaw drivers, though, that they'll have for the rest of their life until the Russo-Japanese War. Okay. Yeah. At which point the Japanese people start looking at them as traitors because, they have ties to the Russian royal family. Yeah. Funny how that works.
So, yeah. But why? What else can we get from that peninsula besides the wood?
So you have the wood, you have the port.
Yeah, you mentioned... We talked about the port?
Yeah.
All right,
I mentioned it briefly because we were talking about how Russia's ports freeze every year.
Yes, okay, we already talked about that. I love my banquet, but it don't love my brain.
I feel like it's been a long week. I feel like my brain's already misfiring. Yeah.
And it's going to be a long weekend.
Yeah, yes, it is.
So there's the reason. Russia, they want this peninsula. They want it badly. And they basically well, our logging company's already there, so it makes it ours, right?
Sure. Nobody's going to have a problem with that.
Nobody's going to have a problem. It's not like there's this other country that believes that it's absolute design to take control of Manchuria and wouldn't never try to make a surprise attack or anything.
No, they don't become known for that later.
To defend their claims over Manchuria.
Yeah.
So anyways, Japan surprise attacks in 1904.
Yes, February 8th I have in my notes here. Yeah.
So for a while everybody kind of knew... Everybody was expecting something to boil over, but it still came as a shock to the world just for how sudden it happened, how Japan was able to mobilize not just an infantry force, but a naval force as well. The naval force is going to pin the Russian Pacific Fleet that they have. They're going to pin them in Port Arthur there on the peninsula. And then they're going to offload infantry on the Korean peninsula and march them through. Oh, by the way, the vestiges of the Korean people at this point, they had actually had a loose allegiance with Russia. At a point, they had actually, the Russian consulate in Korea had actually sheltered I think it was the Korean queen.
Oh, wow.
Or like it was a royal family member when the Japanese were doing one of their purgings. What do we call them?
Ethnic cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
AKA genocide.
Yes.
Which, we're talking about the Manchuria region of China and Korea, that there's more to it than just the rape of Nanking.
Yes.
And we just got demonetized for that, but it happened.
It did. It is a historical event.
So, yeah. So it's this massive full military operation that to the eyes of the Western world comes out of the blue, completely shocks the Russians. The fair Japanese have been kind of playing it properly for some months now.
Yeah.
Get it all put together.
And something that kind of actually works in Japan's favor here is because this is 1904, there's a lot of racism, and the Europeans don't really consider the Japanese capable of taking on a European power.
This includes the Americans.
Yes, this includes the Americans. Pretty much nobody expects Japan to, A, try to challenge one of the Western powers, or B, actually do well in that war, which they are all going to be very shocked here very shortly.
So, yeah, the Japanese Navy, they pin in the Russian Pacific Fleet into Port Arthur as the Japanese infantry is moving upon Port Arthur. You're going to have brutal trench warfare happening around Port Arthur. Like we're talking Great War stuff here.
Yeah, some of the largest battles up until World War I.
Correct. Yeah, very bloody battles. Well, you want to tell us what happens to the Pacific Fleet? Or what's happening to this point?
So...
The first Pacific Fleet.
Yes, so Russia realizes they need to send, like, a really good admiral to go take charge of the Pacific Fleet. And they end up picking Admiral Makarov.
Correct.
Who, by all accounts, is probably one of the most competent military officers in the Russian Navy.
Again, it's the Russian Navy.
Yeah, which, funnily enough, one thing that my book touches on is that Russia had 100 admirals in 1904. The British had 69. So there's a lot of admirals in the Russian Navy that basically are just like political
That would explain
plays.
all the yachts just laying around.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. Is
more on that later.
Yeah, Russia is still very much. I mean, we're talking. This is the last country in Europe to defeudalize. Russia is very much still stuck in the nobility is better than everybody else thing, and you have to find appointments and jobs for everybody. So you have a lot of officers that really have no idea what they're doing. But Makarov's an exception. He's actually, I believe he had experience against the Turks, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Yes. So he actually has combat experience. They're like, we're going to send you.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're going to send him over. They send him over by the Trans-Siberian Railway. And the reason I bring that up, because this is the only major way that Russia can unify its country in a semi-efficient manner at this time and still today.
Yes.
It's the world's longest railroad. It goes from Moscow, today goes all the way to Vladivostok, which that'll be a very important port, by the way, later in our story.
Yes.
But at this period of time, it was actually being extended to Port Arthur. The railroad's not fully finished yet. So there are periods where they're kind of leapfrogging on probably horse and buggy.
Yep.
But it is there, and he's going to take it because it's one man. He's not having to take, let's say, he's not having to take a fleet around the world.
No, there's a fleet there. He just has to get there.
Yeah. So he does get there. It's cool that he gets there.
Yeah. And so he's like, you know what? We're gonna sally forth here. We're gonna go take out the fleet that's under the command of Admiral Tojo, I believe.
Yes.
And basically, Makarov's flagship leaves the harbor, and it strikes a mine. And somehow, through logistics I don't fully understand,
through providence, as George Washington would put it.
Yes, they hit this mine, and generally naval mines, they're in the water, you hit them, it does damage to the boat itself, but somehow a lucky piece of shrapnel, flies up out of the water, goes through the bridge, and decapitates Admiral Makarov, killing him instantly, and splattering several of the other officers in the bridge with blood and viscera. Not a good start.
Those men are shell-shocked.
No, those men are shell-shocked. The boat will sink. I can't remember the name of the flagship of the 1st Pacific Fleet, but yeah, it goes down. Another battleship, I believe, also sinks when turning around to go back into port because it also hits a mine. Now, to be fair, though, Tojo apparently lost several ships to mines over the course of his, blockade as well.
Yeah, the Russians had in mind the holy hell.
Yeah. Russians had it in mind, and, yeah, not a good time. But, yeah, so now the best man for the job is dead, and he didn't do anything. And the fleet is once again stuck in Port Arthur. Nothing has changed. Except now they're down a couple ships.
Down a couple ships, and, well, desperate times call for desperate measures. So, once again, as we mentioned, there's how many? I don't know exactly numerically. Let's say there's roughly 4 major fleets in the Russian Navy. Roughly, if I'm not. There's 4 major bodies of water they have to cover, not covering the Caspian Sea.
Yeah, the Black Sea, the Baltic, the Pacific.
Yep.
Are there 2 Baltic fleets? Is that the...
Anyways.
Yeah. So
that's not what's important.
But
what's important is that any nearby help is gone.
Yeah. I think they have a small flotilla up in Vladivostok.
They probably do.
They kind of aren't really capable of doing anything. But yeah, so basically the bulk of Russia's naval power that's left is now in Europe.
Not just in Europe, on the west side.
Yes.
So, the Tsar and his military advisors come up with a bold strategy.
Yes.
They are going to send the Baltic fleet of the Russian Navy, reinforce it with as many ships as they can grab from their other smaller squadrons, and they're going to rechristen them the Second Pacific Squadron, and their destination is Port Arthur. Now, Connor.
Yes.
That's a terribly long distance.
It is about 18,000 miles. Also, big problem is that all of the Russian ships are coal burning. And unlike England and France, who have global empires with coaling stations all over the place, Russia has none.
Because they pissed everybody off.
Yes, because they pissed everybody off. But even if they hadn't, Russia has no overseas colonies they can stop at to reliably recoal. And because they're traveling 18,000 miles, they're getting you recoal a lot. I think it's over a dozen times over the course of their voyage they're going to have to recall.
The wonders of feudalism and serfdom.
Yeah. So on top of that, also that's a speaking of feudalism, Russia is still working off a conscription system at this point, and so the bulk of the sailors that are actually being assigned to these ships have never seen the ocean before. Imagine
most of your experienced sailors, they're in Port Arthur.
Yes. So that means that imagine that your comrade conscriptovich, I guess not comrade yet because we're not quite to the Soviet era.
Not quite there. They're thinking it.
They're thinking it. So you're peasant conscriptovich, and you end up you live in some village out in say Belarus maybe somewhere, and you take this massive journey. You're joining the military, and you see the ocean for the first time. And they put you on board this boat, and this is where you're going to live for the next couple of years. And if you're going on this voyage, this is probably where you're going to die as well.
We taking bets on how long before peasant conscriptovich is going to jump ship and swim for his life?
If he was smart, he would have already done it. He would have hopped off the train on the way going up there.
Indeed. Well, this sounds like a nearly impossible mission. So surely the Russian Navy have the man for the job.
They do. They have Admiral Zinovy Mad Dog Petrovich Rozhestvensky. Admiral Rozhestvensky. I'm just calling him Mad Dog. Screw it. Mad Dog. Mad Dog, once again, actually a competent officer. Very good gunner. Has good gunner experience. He studied in England, apparently, at one point you were saying earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Naval attaché from the Russians to go to London in 1885 to bear witness to the might of the Royal Navy's gunnery in the late 19th century, which will stay the art. And boy, did Mad Dog love it. Yes. He hated the English, but he loved their artillery. And he became a big-time gunnery leader in the Russian Navy. A good portion of the guns that are on the Russian warships at the turn of the 20th century, you can thank Mad Dog for having a hand in it.
Yeah, and the thing is, Mad Dog accepts this appointment because, he is an officer and he has to go where he's told. He does not have high hopes that this expedition is going to be successful. He fully expects them to essentially get to the Pacific and immediately get destroyed by the Japanese. But he has a job.
Why is he spoiling the story?
What?
Well, he's spoiling the ending, but he's not telling you the juicy parts.
Yeah. Well, he had a premonition, as it were. But yeah, because the boats that he's put in charge of, there's a handful of relatively modern cruisers that are fresh out of the yards for the most part.
Yes, that would be the Borodino class. At this time, there are 4 Borodino class battleships in the Russian Navy. They are the state-of-the-art technology in Russia. There will be a 5th one made in 1905, but remember, we're still in 1904. So for all intents and purposes, this entire class of warship is being made into the newly rechristened Second Pacific Squadron.
Yes, and then from there, it's basically every other vessel they can find that has guns on it that they can send to the Pacific.
And I want to stress, we're in the age of naval warfare, which I call the spam can era.
Spam can.
Yeah, so they've been, ever since people figured out, oh crap, we can put iron on the sides of our ships. It'll make it harder against enemy artillery pieces. Well, they went crazy with the iron over the years. They went crazy with the shape. And by this point, you really don't got a ship, like the idea we think of a ship's hull. What you got is a spam can, because it's loaded down with so much armor and so much artillery that it basically just starts sitting in the water below their own waterline. So think of your USS Olympias. Think of your Auroras. Yes, in the Russian Navy, which is still around today.
Yes, it's one of the only. It's the only survivor from this expedition.
We will talk about her. Think of those type of ships. But yeah, I call it the spam can era before we got to the dreadnoughts.
Yeah, so
I don't like the term pre-dreadnought. It's too boring. Yeah. So it's the spam can era.
I like spam can. So you have the spam cans. You have yachts that have been converted over to gunboats. You have ships that should have been decommissioned 20 years ago. I believe some of the oldest ships on this expedition were built in the 1860s, if I remember correctly. So it is a motley collection of boats. It's basically anything that still floats that has guns is going to be sent on the trip.
I don't know. I have the technical one written down here, but I'm already far into the banquet. Approximately 40 ships are going to be put together for the Second Pacific Squadron.
Including the hospital ship Oriole, which has Mad Dog's mistress on board it as well. Yes. Yeah, because Mad Dog also, as most Russian noblemen, has a lot of mistresses. Interestingly enough, though, despite how that might make him sound, he actually spent a crap ton of time preparing for this expedition.
Absolutely. For as much of a defeatist as he is preparing to go down with the ship. He wants to go out in a blaze of glory. So he's making sure that, at the very least, we're going to get there.
Yeah. He actually, according to this book at least, he was working like 18-hour days for like weeks straight.
Yes. Yeah, my book also reports the same. The Russian government are also going to make one of their few good ace up their sleeves are going to pull out, and that is they're going to get the Hamburg America line.
Yes.
It's a steamship line. They're going to contact them. They're a German-based steam line to coal their warships at various ports across their journey. I also would like to say that this may just be Nicholas II asking a really good favor from his cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II.
Yes. And Kaiser Wilhelm II definitely butters the Tsar up on this, because he's like, I'm going to become the ruler of the Atlantic, and you're going to become the ruler of the Pacific. We're going to kick the British butt. We're going to take over the seas. It's going to be great.
This is translation for, thank goodness my ugly cousin is out of the way. Now I can rule the Atlantic. Look out, Britannia.
Yes.
How does that go for him, by the way?
For Tsar Nicholas?
Not Tsar, we know what happens.
Or sorry, for Kaiser Wilhelm?
Yes.
Well, you see, there's this little thing called World War I.
In the Battle of the Jutland.
And the Battle of Jutland. And at the end of World War I, the German Navy does the funny.
That's a video for another.
That's a video for another day. And of course, Kaiser Wilhelm II has to abdicate and spends the rest of his life living on an estate in Holland, I believe, where he just chops down trees for like hours a day and becomes super buff. That's literally it. Like he just retires, becomes a lumberjack.
Sounds like my grandfather.
Yeah. There's worse things, for sure.
My apologies, not my grandfather, my great-grandfather.
He retired from being the emperor and started chopping down trees?
Not the emperor part, but retired to cut down trees, yes.
Yep. But yeah, so after months of preparation, they were ready to go.
Yes. But we forgot one more piece to our puzzle.
Oh, which part?
There's a certain ship.
Ah, yes. The Kamchatka. Which is...
the devil's favorite military vessel.
Yes, the Kamchatka, which I believe is one of the fleet's repair ships, if I remember correctly.
It is.
So the Kamchatka, you're going to hear a lot about throughout this story, because it is quite possibly the single most chaotic entity that has ever existed in the history of warfare. It does and says things that make no sense. And I'm somewhat convinced it may or may not have been crewed and captained by a Japanese spy, or Japanese spies plural. But we'll get there when we get there. But yes, it is probably one of my favorite ships in military history just because of this. And Mad Dog would later label this ship. He was good with the nicknames. He would nickname the Kamchatka the lecherous slut.
Every time you say that,
it's a funny nickname.
He got one for every different ship and every different commander.
Yes, I believe the Aurora, the cruiser Aurora, would become the whore later as well.
Hey, come on,
yeah.
Don't talk to her like that. She's the harbinger of the revolution.
Oh, but you see, the thing is that Russian ships are male. They don't go with the female naming convention.
Why?
I don't know. I literally don't know what the background behind that is.
Well, again, we're talking about the country that basically bans anime for all intents and purposes.
Well, Isekai specifically, but that's a whole other...
Well, joke's on them. Totally would never use any ship girls to symbolize these ships we're talking about. No.
Are there ship girls in some of these ships?
There is for the Aurora.
But not the Kamchatka?
Not for non-official ones.
We need
not yet.
We need to commission some more work, yeah. Write that down. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, so basically, once the fleet, assembles... I'd like to point out, this is on page 46 of this 80-page book. There's a battleship called Oriole. I know I talked about the hospital ship Oriole earlier.
Yeah, there's one with the same name, and that totally doesn't get confusing
yes,
in any way.
The battleship Oriole is also here.
Don't freak out, guys. It was just me in my chair.
And basically... Yeah, as they're getting ready to leave, Captain Bukhvostov of the Alexander III addressed well-wishers with a few doom-laden words. There will be no victory. I'm afraid we will lose half the squadron on our way to the Far East. If this does not happen, the Japanese will annihilate us. Their ships are better, and they are real sailors. I can promise you one thing. We will all die, but never surrender.
Godspeed, Spider-Man!
Yep.
Well, Are we off?
We are off.
And what happens on day one?
Day one, the Oriole grounds itself on a mud bank. And has to be pulled off. I do not believe
Is this the battleship or hospital?
This is the battleship Oriole.
Oh, great.
The fleet decides they are not going to wait for her. If I remember, I'm calling him her. Screw it. I believe they decide they're just not waiting for her. She can catch up later. They eventually, as they're going along, they dock in the harbor of Lebau, which is the last Russian port they're going to see before they continue on. And the fleet's flagship will also run aground here as well.
Yes, that would be the... Was it the Suvorov?
Yes. Yeah, the Suvorov.
Suvorov, yeah. That's the flagship. That's who Mad Dog's sitting upon.
Yes, that's what Mad Dog's in.
And also in the Suvorov, by the way, they have a stockpile of binoculars.
Yes, because when Mad Dog gets angry, he will sometimes just chuck his binoculars overboard.
They got like 50 binoculars on the ship.
Yeah, his aides knew this and actually bought a crate of binoculars to bring on this trip.
Good aides. They were prepared.
It is not reported how many were left at the end of this journey. It might have had to be resupplied.
I watched one YouTuber that says you can track this entire fleet by finding the binoculars on the ocean floor.
That's a good question. So is the Suvorov, has the wreck been located? Is it there?
Have any of these wrecks been located?
I'm not
They're
sure.
all kind of in the same location, aren't they?
Yeah. I would think. I don't know if anybody's ever done like the research to go down.
I didn't look up.
But I'd be curious, is there a crate full of binoculars sitting in the rusted out hold of the Suvorov?
And can the Fubar Digital Lounge become possessions of it?
Yes.
So that we could chuck it over the side of this balcony.
As is tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So also, as this is happening, the battleship Sazoi the Licky also loses her anchors.
What's up with the anchor chains?
Yeah, anchor chains are going to become a problem. There's a few other anchor-related incidents.
Yeah.
By the way, this is the last Russian... They haven't even left Russian water yet. This is the last Russian port that they're leaving.
What are we in? September? No, we're in October. It's 1904.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in October 1904.
Now, I want to say is they are starting to leave Russian waters. And remember, Mad Dog's been prepping this futile campaign for 3-4 months. And the international press has gotten hold on what he's doing. So this is no secret operation to the Japanese or to anybody. And the entire international press is reporting day to day on the prep work that the Russians are doing because they have morbid curiosity, and everybody, including Mad Dog, knows this is going to fail.
Yes.
And they just want to see how spectacular the failures can be. Boy, do they not realize how spectacular that what they're about to bear witness to.
Yes, and this is the first instance of the Kamchatka doing something that I have in my notes. So at this point, they're crossing the Danish Strait, and they decide they're going to do some mine sweeping, because their spies have reported there may or may not be mines in the Danish Strait.
But the Japanese are on in the Pacific, and
yes,
we're not even near the Atlantic yet.
Yes,
we're going toward the Atlantic.
Yes,
it's no disrespect to Japan, but it's Japan in 1904. They don't have that infrastructure.
All these things are correct. Yes. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Russian espionage in the early 20th century, where apparently they had a pay-by-story system, where if you were a spy for the Russian Empire, you were only getting paid if you were providing intel. Which, if you think about it for 5 seconds, means that it actually incentivizes you to just make shit up. And so the Russians have received all kinds of fascinating intel. That there are that there are mines in the Danish Straits, and that there are Japanese torpedo boats in the North Sea operating out of bases in Norway.
Though, yes, I greatly recall that magical Japanese base in Norway.
Yes.
I remember it fondly.
Yes, it was.
I had cheesecake there this past Saturday.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Yeah, from the kitchen or from the cafe?
From the cafe.
Oh, good choice. They have better cake. So
it's right next to the U-boat pen, right?
Yes. Yeah, the one that Hitler escaped to Argentina from.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah, that one.
I don't know where the cheesecake line came from.
It's canon now. So
is.
But yeah, so to be fair, as I said earlier, Japan did purchase ships from England previously, so it's possible that maybe the spies, they bought boats from England. Maybe the boats are still here. I don't know.
But humble. When has Japan in this time period showed any interest beyond the Pacific Ocean?
None whatsoever.
Why would they be out there? What would make the Russians think that they would be out there? Especially considering that the Russians are the ones that underestimated the Japanese to begin this whole war with.
Well, see, now they've swung the other direction.
They're paranoid as all hell now.
Yes, they're paranoid as all hell now, yes. No. Because they are actually losing a war against Japan, which as far as everybody in Europe and America is concerned, should be impossible. And now they're sending their B team to go and clean up this mess. And yeah, they're paranoid as all heck, as we're going to see very shortly. But yeah, so Kamchatka makes a chain with 50 hooks on it to start sweeping for mines, and the chain breaks 3 times. Is not very effective at all. Luckily, there are no mines in the Danish Strait.
It takes like a whole day for this fleet to sweep the whole area.
Yeah, and also, as this is going on, the destroyer Zemchuk lost one of its cutters, and the destroyer Beast 3 accidentally rammed the battleship Osliabya. Yes. So all of this is happening, and Mad Dog himself will actually have live shells fired off the bow of the icebreaker Yermik because it's maneuvering so erratically he's afraid it's going to actually ram somebody else.
He gets so pissed off of it, he sends it home.
Yes, because, of all of the ships you want to be rammed by, an icebreaker probably is not one of them.
Humble?
Yes.
Why do they have an icebreaker?
I was wondering about that myself. Because if things go according to plan, they should not need an icebreaker for anything. But
they
again,
should be out of freezing water on the right time schedule.
Yes. Well, and also, again, if they're going to Port Arthur, you shouldn't need an icebreaker.
It's the whole point why we're fighting this war.
But I think this is one of those situations where, again, they were just trying to get any ship that could float, and they're like, it's an icebreaker. Okay.
I guess they could freaking ram it.
Exactly.
One of the Togo ships.
Maybe that's the plan. Maybe they're going to pack it full of explosives, like a fire ship, and they're just going to ram.
Oh my god. What is this, the Siege of Quebec?
You know what? They get a little lost on the way. I have in my notes here that Russian sailors hallucinate 2 balloons.
Oh yes, they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, this is where the hallucinations begin. And to our knowledge, they don't have the hallucinogenics on the ship yet.
Yet, that's the key word.
But yes, during one of their nights, they do claim they spot 2 silvery objects in the sky. Are these Chinese spy balloons?
Yes.
Did they time travel between... So you're telling me that this Chinese balloon time traveled between being over the state of Oregon in 2024, jumped back to the Atlantic Ocean in 1904 to fuck with these Russians, and then fast forward back to get shot down over the Carolinian coast in 2024?
Or I've often wondered this, because, you have, like, the historical, like, weird stuff in the sky from out of human history. Do you think in the future we have drones that can time travel to go record stuff, and do you think just occasionally people have seen them? Like, do you think this is just a bunch of, like, historians, like, 500 years from now send a drone back
to go... it's us 20 years down.
It could be us 20 years from now. We sent some drones to go look at the Second Pacific Squadron, and that caused this incident. Though I guess also, when did Germany start building Zeppelins? I mean, they're off the coast of Germany at this point-ish.
I don't think yet.
Yeah.
Not to this scale.
No, but I was just curious if maybe there was, like, some weird Zeppelin drill or something going on, but yeah.
Who knows? There's also, according to my book, there's also a red light that appears on the sides of the ships at one point.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember that from my book. That's interesting. Okay.
I don't know.
What does that mean?
I don't know what it means.
Laser sights? Aliens, man. Alien space bats.
Yeah. I think this is going to show that this inexperienced crew who've already been told by their commander that they're going to die, and, they already have low morale, and they've never been at sea, at least they've not been at sea this long a period of time, they're already starting to freak out.
Yes. Yeah, the officers' personal thoughts have become very public, and the crew is very much aware of them. Yeah. Oh, also I have that apparently Mad Dog almost didn't get the telegram noting that he had been promoted to Rear Admiral because the fishing boat that had been hired to bring the message out to them almost got sunk because they thought it was a Japanese torpedo boat. Wow, the Second Pacific Squadron firing on civilian vessels, never going to happen again. No. Not a...
It was a crazy thing, man.
And this is the point where Kamchatka disappears for the first of many times. Disappears from the fleet, nobody knows where she is, and all of a sudden she radios that she's being chased by torpedo boats. And then, I can't remember, I don't have in my notes here exactly what happens, but I'm pretty sure that, like, they try to get some clarifying information, and then she clarifies she's not being chased by torpedo boats, or that they disappeared. Kamchatka is a very strange boat.
It really is.
Might be an SCP, to be honest.
And, well, I think this brings us to the night of October 21st into the 22nd, 1904.
Yes, the almost beginning of World War I.
So what I want to do is I want you to tell you... We're first going to tell what the Russians perceived that night before we let the reality set in.
Yes.
Because it took them a few weeks to know what they did.
Yes. it took some time.
I want you to picture it. You are making your way into the North Sea. You're off the coast of the British Empire. You know, the greatest navy in the world at this period of time. You don't want to mess with these people. You don't want to flinch as you're moving your fleet around Great Britain.
Yeah. The home fleet could destroy the Russian Second Pacific Squadron with 2 hands behind its back.
Yes.
Yes.
So, they're making their way through, you know, business as usual. Kamchatka's, you know, being the Kamchatka, you know,
yeah,
all this wonderful stuff. I'm sure one of the ships have steering malfunctions because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And as we get into nighttime, we start getting rapid reports that there are torpedo boats. According to Mad Dog's later action report, there were 2 torpedo boats. However, at the time, the crews were reporting many, many more. By any chance, do you recall what ship was the one that reported first? I don't have that in my notes.
Let me check my... I have a page number here. Let me see if I can verify that.
I want to double check this. Is it like a Kamchatka sighting?
It might be.
I'd be surprised if it was not.
At 1 a.m., watchkeepers on the bridge of the Suvorov saw several ships...
So the flagship!
Yes, out of the gloom.
The Mother effing flagship!
Yes. And because they were small and showed no lights, according to the watchers.
Yes. And they're, according to the crew, just zipping between the flotilla.
Yes.
Like zigzagging faster than any torpedo boat's been known to do. But hey, these are Japanese torpedo boats coming out from that mythical base out of Norway, so...
Yes, and Mad Dog himself will claim afterwards that in the light of one of the searchlights, he positively identified a torpedo boat. Like, he saw it with his own eyes. It wasn't somebody else telling it was there. He saw it. And he swore for the rest of his life that he saw it.
The night sky lights up like a Roman candle. I believe it's, I want to say the Aurora at least reports firing 500 rounds or something like that during this moment.
Which is over 50% of its ammo, if I remember correctly. Yes. That's
apologies, not the Aurora, the Oral.
Yes, which is another thing about this. The fleet has enough ammunition for some training exercises and 1 fleet engagement. That is all the ammo they have for this expedition.
And they're in close quarters and they're firing. There's no concentration of fire. They're firing every way they know how. You know, just to be thorough, just to be safe, of course. Just cover all your bases. This does lead to friendly fire in this engagement. And this is where I thought about the Aurora, because the Aurora gets hit with friendly fire, injuring one of the gunners, and killing a chaplain on board.
Yes, one of the chaplains apparently just gets beamed right through the wall of his quarters, like as he's getting up to see what is going on. So God has abandoned them at this point.
At this point.
Yes.
So
if he had not already, he definitely was here.
The shooting goes on for about 20 minutes before Mad Dog calls for a ceasefire, and everybody slowly gets the message. Is there any other actions, any details we're missing about this battle?
Yes. After the firing stops, Admiral Enqvist, who is referred to as a vast empty space at this point by Mad Dog, actually fires on the flagship after firing has stopped, but misses. So nobody else gets hit at that point.
Whew.
And yeah, they just sail on, and they think that they did a thing.
There's varying degrees of uncertainty if they've done a number on the enemy or not, because it was nighttime and they were so close to each other, to full-on celebrations.
Yeah, they're drinking a vodka. Yeah, the vodka gets broken out. They're like, man,
they have avenged Makarov.
We sunk so many torpedo boats, like it's not even funny. Yeah.
So they're eventually going to get to port in Spain a couple weeks later.
Yeah, the port of Vigo. I believe. Yes. And it is at this moment that they knew that they fucked up.
Yeah, because when they arrived, they're expecting, okay, you know, we're a foreign power, we'll be treated, you know, the customary, you know, we'll be allowed to refuel and everything to be great. Well, they show up, and the Spanish authorities there meet Mad Dog on the port, and they're like, we're giving you 24 hours because that's what we can legally give you by international law. And then you got to get out of here because the British want you gone.
Yes. So, funny thing about the British.
So, you know that North Sea.
Yeah, you know that North Sea. You know
what the big industry is in that North Sea?
Yeah, it's underwater basket weaving.
No.
No. Oh, it's fishing. That's correct, yes. So this becomes known as the Dogger Bank incident because the North Sea fishing fleet is out minding its own business, fishing, as they've done for literal centuries at this point. And they notice there's a bunch of big ships coming toward them out of the dark. And they don't think much of it. There's British naval ships all over the place. Well, then they start getting shot at. 3 British fishermen have been killed. Many have been wounded. And all kinds of boats have been damaged. I believe one boat is sunk or almost sunk. But yeah, this hits the front page of the Times in London the next day. And the British people are out for blood. They want war declared on Russia today. Now, luckily, King George is Tsar Nicholas's cousin.
Noticing how they're all related to each other in Europe? Which totally would not cause any problems.
By the way, there's a very nice picture of Tsar Nicholas and King George together. They literally look like twins.
It's crazy.
It's freaking weird. But yeah, so the British are kind of in a bad spot because their civilians have been attacked unprovoked by an entire Russian fleet. And again, this is an entire fleet, dozens of warships, all firing their guns from point-blank range. And they've killed 3 British sailors, or fishermen. And how many casualties did they take from friendly fire there, Redoubt?
At least 1 chaplain was killed, 1 is injured.
Yes. So they barely have a positive KD against unarmed fishermen at this point.
Our heroes.
Yes. So yeah, this is a problem. There's a lot of diplomatic finagling to try to stop Europe from descending into World War I. And basically, Mad Dog is told that he needs to take some of the officers responsible for this incident and send them back to stand trial, basically.
And by those responsible, we mean the ones that Mad Dog does not like.
Yes, he gets rid of specifically officers that he does not like, and he sends them to The Hague, where they're going to be tried.
Honestly, for those guys, this is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, guess what? You're going to save yourselves. You get to get off this fleet.
Yes, it actually proves to be a blessing.
The Voyage of the Damned. You are spared.
Yes. So the
British, we're only a third of the way there.
We are. So the British admiral, I can't remember who's in charge of the Channel Fleet at that time, but he's basically approached and is like, "Hey, if we have to fight the Second Pacific Squadron here, what is it going to take?" And he looks at the ships they have, and he looks at the aftermath of Dogger Bank, and he basically says that if it comes to a fleet engagement, he's going to take 3 battleships, and he'll bring the rest of the fleet along as replacements in case any of them get mildly damaged by the Russians. So the admiral of the Channel Fleet has basically said, I can 3v42 the Russians at this point with their abysmal gunnery and training. Luckily, it doesn't come to that would have also been kind of funny in retrospective. But yeah. So, crisis averted. Except the Kamchatka was off doing some stuff. Got separated from the fleet yet again, for reasons unknown, and came back.
Unknown to man.
What?
Unknown to man.
Unknown to man. Only known to God now, since all those poor suckers died. And apparently, while it was out, had shelled 3 Japanese cruisers. It was happy to report. The 3 Japanese cruisers in question were a Swedish merchantman, a French schooner, and a German trawler.
It's like all the colors of the rainbow.
Yes. So, after causing 1 international incident, they caused 3 more. And once again, somehow the Kamchatka doesn't get sent home at this point, which...
Would it go home, though?
I'd probably end up in frickin'... I don't even know. It'd probably time warp it and end up in, like, the Battle of the Coral Sea or something.
Oh, no. God, no. The Japanese and Americans freak out.
Yep.
Run, it's a Kamchatka. Don't go near it. It's an orb of confusion.
Yep. Which, again, I'm kind of convinced the Kamchatka, maybe they weren't Japanese spies. Could they have been communist agents?
That is a little more believable to me.
Yeah. I think that the Kamchatka does so much nonsense over the course of this voyage, it has to be intentional. There is no way that anyone is this incompetent.
But are those guys like, we must do this for Mother Russia? Or is it more like, oh, look at this crazy stuff we can pull now?
I feel like they thought, because we know that communist sympathy was high in the fleet. That was a problem they were dealing with the entire voyage. So it makes sense that maybe the Kamchatka were a bunch of commies. And they're like, we're going to really stick it to the Tsar here and cause all kinds of problems for him. And they do.
Though I feel you may be giving too much credit to communists.
I might be. That is... I don't want to... I don't want to summon the fat electrician to come in and tell me that I'm wrong. But
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
It'd be pretty cool.
It would be.
But at this point, though, the fleet is going to split.
Yes. First they're going to go to Tapir first, then they'll split.
Oh, Tangier?
Tangier.
Yeah.
Tapir, what's Tapir? I don't know. Tangier,
Isn't a tapir one of those, like giant, hamster things that lives down in, South America? The big rats?
No, I know what a tapeworm is, though.
That's different than a tapir. That's different than Tangier. Also different than a tangerine, though they have the same letters.
They do.
Yes. But yeah.
But it's a Tangier, I believe, is actually where they do the split.
Yeah, because
it's just a little jaunt down from Spain to Morocco, for the record.
Yeah, it's super short split. Now, at this point, though, half the fleet, the newer part of the fleet, is going to go the whole way around Africa.
Yeah, including your Borodino-class battleships.
Yes. The older ships are going to go through the Suez Canal. Now, who owns the Suez Canal at this point?
The British Empire?
Yeah, the British Empire. And who did we almost start a war with about
I believe
2 minutes
it was
ago?
the Brits.
Yeah. Luckily, the Brits were eventually willing to let them through the Suez, but there was...
What type of blackmail did Nicholas II have on George V?
I think that after seeing everything else that these ships have done, they might have just been afraid to leave them near the Suez Canal for too long. If we leave them here too long, they're going to accidentally, start another war, maybe, and they're like, just get them through the Suez. Just let them pass. Let them pass.
The most efficient ride for the Suez Canal.
Yeah. But as they're leaving Tangiers, though, the transport Andir will cut the telegraph cable between Tangier and Europe.
Oh, my God.
And Kamchatka was also rammed by the flagship.
I do remember this part.
Yes, because its steering gear is jammed.
Did the flagship ram the Kamchatka, or the Kamchatka intentionally put itself in front of the flagship?
I have that it was almost rammed by the flagship, so it sounds like Kamchatka was sailing along and the flagship's steering gear froze. I'm putting air quotes up, you can't see that. Because part of me wonders if Mad Dog might have just had a moment of
I can do it!
I can do it!
Oh no!
He was letting the intrusive thoughts in for a second,
At that moment, it might have been a good idea to let the intrusive thoughts take over.
Honestly.
Would have saved many lives.
It would have, yeah.
Somehow killing a bunch of lives would saved even more. But unfortunately, that's not what happened for the Mad Dog.
No, he had to keep going.
Yep. The battleship, the Borodino classes, they take off around the West African coast. And we're going to take a break, folks, because guess what? We're barely halfway through this odyssey.
Yes.
This hellacious odyssey across the world. I hope you're enjoying it thus far, because boy, is Mad Dog not enjoying himself.
No, he's having an awful time.
He really is. So, we're going to take a break. It's going to be momentary for you guys, and we'll be right back. And we're back, and I got water IV.
And I have rum and coke.
Don't worry, I got another beer. And I have just enough of a Bradley to finish off.
Yeah, you got a good... That should get us through a good chunk of what remains.
What do you think Mad Dog smoked?
I'm trying to think what tobacco was popular in Russia at the time. Because I know from
tobacco.
From my World War I knowledge, I know that the Central Powers were basically smoking Bulgarian tobacco most of World War I. So I don't know if pre-World War I I don't know if Bulgaria started growing tobacco because of World War I or what, but I guess it's feasible. They're close to Russia. That would make sense. They probably had some imported stuff. I mean, Mad Dog was a nobleman, so he probably had access to, the good Havana stuff if he wanted it. He also just strikes me as just a straight opium kind of guy, maybe.
Well, he's going to get his wish soon.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he is.
Where were we?
So, they arrived at their first recoaling destination, which is the French port of Dakar. Dakar, D-A-K-A-R.
For the record, they didn't go back to France. They're in West Africa.
Yeah, this is the whole thing. So in addition to having the Hamburg Steamship Company line, that's not its name, but it's close enough. In addition to having them coming along to coal them where necessary, they've also made arrangements with the French and British governments and German governments to try to recoal at certain places along the way. And Dakar is one of them. However, after the absolute shit show of getting out of Europe, the French governor basically tells them, I can't let you recoal here. I've been ordered not to let you recoal here.
To which Mad Dog goes, what are you going to do, shoot at me with your shore batteries?
In which the French governor says, we don't have any of those. And then they kind of give each other a look, and they do the finger guns. Like,
and in that moment, Mad Dog realized there is hope in humanity. He has found somebody even more poorly equipped than himself.
Yes. So they were able to recoal. Things are good. Things are fine. However, they know that they're probably not going to be able to recoal at their next port that they were planning on. So what do you do when you have to take on extra fuel for your journey?
Say what we tried, boys, and go back and tell the Tsar that this is a hopeless situation?
Unfortunately, no. You are not allowed to choose that option.
Oh, darn.
That's not an option in this visual novel. I'm sorry.
I guess we'll just have to stow it all in our additional rooms.
Yeah. That's what they do.
They're not just on the rooms, on the deck, too.
Yeah, to the point they're actually sticking spare coal in officers' quarters. Like, every square inch of space in these ships is being filled with coal.
Now, and you thought Valley Forge was bad.
Now, Redoubt, you know quite a bit more about coal and steam than I do. Is there a problem with sticking coal in every conceivable open space in your vessel?
You see, coal, especially when it's dry, creates this lovely thing called coal dust. Which is why if you see any photographs or images of a coal mine nowadays, especially in the Western Hemisphere, people are confused why it almost looks like it's white-walled. Well, that's because they are blasting it down with all sorts of chemicals, some type of liquid chemical, to keep it to the walls so it doesn't waft into the air. Because when you have coal dust in the air, it's very toxic to breathe into. Have you ever heard of black lung? You hear a lot about coal miners suffering from black lung.
Yes.
Well, that's because they spend their whole lives, these miners, inhaling coal dust, and it just basically fries their lungs, just turns them into tiny raisins, and they're useless. That leads to their deaths. And it interrupts, surprisingly enough, my grandfather, 30 years in the mines. He's one of the few people that, amongst his peers, never had black lung.
Huh.
To be fair, but at that point, he started mining in the 70s, and there was enough protocols to try to deter it, but it was still prevalent. Mm-hmm. So, no, he's one of the few people that I know personally in this region that no black lung worked mines for such a long period of time. Mm-hmm. Anyways, you have that. The other thing is when you waft coal dust in the air, you're basically turning the atmosphere into flint and steel. Because one small spark will set the whole thing ablaze.
Yeah, dust explosions are a thing.
I got a lovely video on my channel about this happening in the Dar mine, deadliest mine disaster in Pennsylvania history. 239 guys up in smoke in a millisecond.
Yep.
Okay, maybe a little bit longer, but you get my point.
Yeah, so this is a major health and safety problem.
And I also want to point out that we are on the West African coast, and it's over 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes, multiple people dropped dead during this recoaling from the heat. Not good.
Not good.
So I also have, I don't know if this happened before they left this port or one of their other recoaling destinations, but apparently 3 officers get discharged because they were caught smuggling a nurse back to the hospital.
I did read about that.
Yeah.
Quote-unquote smuggling.
Which is funny because Mad Dog's mistress did visit him several times on the flagship for dinner.
Clearly was not his mistress.
No.
Or if it was, he was very upset that she was seeing other men.
Yeah, I don't believe it was her, though, if it was.
Seeing men that were less angry than him.
Yeah.
But we understand why he's angry.
Yeah, but at this point, like, the whole journey down West Africa is basically trying to find ports to recoal in, and then not being allowed into ports or not having ports available to them, and having to recoal at sea.
You can't see this on camera, but I just gave a deer in the headlights look to Connor.
Yes, because recoaling is arduous, back-breaking work when you're in a harbor on flat water. These are recoaling on the open ocean with waves and stuff.
Not good.
And, you know, when the ships are next to each other, they can't use any heavy equipment or anything. They're literally bringing the coal over in buckets. Just manhandling them between the Hamburg steamship line ships and the ships of the fleet at multiple points during this journey. 8 hours long, stuck together in the open ocean under the hot African sun, transporting literal tons of coal by hand. And they did this several times as they traveled around Africa. You didn't see that. You almost knocked.
No, I don't need that. I need banquet.
You need your banquet, yeah.
I need my banquet. You didn't see me nearly throw a glass like binoculars over this balcony like it was the bridge of a warship.
Yeah, like in the modern oil fuel based days, you can do refueling at sea. It's not ideal, but you can do it.
Yeah, but we're in the 21st century.
Basically, nobody in their right mind attempts recoalings at sea. And granted, if you're the British or the French, or even the Germans, you don't need to. You have colonies available for that. Or you have other kind of arrangements. But Russia, again, has no infrastructure for this mission whatsoever.
And if you wonder why the audio may have just went down a few pegs, this is our first time messing with this somewhat cheap microphone. We're still getting the hang of doing this. It's better than what we used to do.
Yes.
So the good thing is you can hear us now. The bad news is you may be hearing us a little too much.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But yeah, as they're making their way down though, and they're going through all this nonsense. Admittedly, my notes kind of get a bit light here. I don't know if there are any other notable port things.
Left docker. Let's see, where are we going next? So, we found that there's 3 officers trying to send a nurse across between the boats. A telegraph. At this point, he's gonna. Mad Dog's trying to get himself back into the groove. Okay, we're about halfway there. We gotta go fight the Japanese. Maybe we start doing some target practicing.
Oh yeah.
So they're gonna start doing target practicing.
How does that go for them?
Doesn't go well at all. Sometimes they hit their own ships. Other times they can't hit their own mark. Sometimes the ships nearly ram into each other. And I quote at one point as the actual Borodino, not the class, the actual battleship Borodino is taking part in these exercises. It is going so horribly that Rozhestvensky is going to apply with, you don't know how to command your ship.
Yeah.
Because they're just going back and forth with communications, and nobody's understanding these signals. For the record, apparently no ship in this fleet, with the exception of the Sorvov, knows how to read, light signals and flag signals. And
yes.
We're in the Navy.
There's miscommunications all the time. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Question, was the Borodino, was that under Admiral Enquist or Felkersum? Do you know?
Don't recall off the top of my head.
I was about to say, because I know that I mentioned that Enquist was known as a vast empty space at one point. Admiral Felkersum, his nickname was a manure sack. Also, at some point during the voyage, Enquist also became the slutty old geezer, as he was being called by Mad Dog. But I know one of them was in charge of that ship, I'm fairly certain. But
all right, so then we eventually get to the point. So now we're getting to the point they're about to go around the Horn.
Yes, which is historically a very dangerous crossing.
And of course they hit the Horn during a storm.
Yes. And Kamchatka signals that she wants to dump her useless coal during the storm. And immediately follows that up with, did anybody else see those torpedo boats?
To which there's a brief moment where everybody freaks out, completely forgets the lesson they have learned back at the Dongor Bang.
Well, see, Japan also has that torpedo boat base on the Horn of Africa.
Yes,
out of Cape Town.
Yes, of course. The Zulus were assisting them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
True story.
Yeah, the Zulu Navy. It's very well known.
Yes, I've heard about them.
Immediately followed with, wrong code, everything is fine.
To which Mad Dog is probably just thrown a whole box of binoculars out.
Mad Dog's literally like going down to one of the batteries. He's already swinging it into place by himself. He's like, I'm gonna kill him.
My finger's on the trigger. Don't try to stop me, Smee. Oh, not again.
I want to stress that I don't know precisely when this occurs during the Odyssey, as we'll refer to it as, but at some point he has enough with the Kamchatka's actions, and he's going to insist that Kamchatka sit right behind him in line. Basically, like if you're in trouble with the bus driver going to school and he puts you right in the front seat, that is what Mad Dog does with the Kamchatka. And not just that, as they're going along their journey, during the whole day when he has free time to vent, Mad Dog gets on the stern of the Sorvov, gets out a bighorn, and just starts shouting obscenities at the Kamchatka. I don't know when exactly that occurs during this Odyssey. I think it happens regularly.
Man, I just want a 10-minute recording of him ranting at the Kamchatka. it would be the greatest historical record of all time. It really...
Very, very sophisticated language.
Yes.
I never knew the Russian language could go this deep.
Yeah, Mad Dog was a master of the Russian obscenity. He could string Russian profanity together like no one else ever could.
And by some miracle, the Borodino-class ships and Mad Dog's half of the fleet, remember, there's the other half's going through the Suez Canal, they're having it somewhat easy.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, they're hanging out in the Med for the most part. I think there's one port they stop in that they cause minor local incidents because sailors getting drunk in port and doing stupid things. Yeah.
Compared to this stuff, that don't count.
Yeah, no. Fairly minor, especially for, like, sailors on shore leave, my understanding. But,
And anyways, after this nightmare, and what are we at? We're in 1905 now?
I think we're in 1905
Okay, we're like,
now.
what, winter 1905. And these guys, well, Mad Dog deserves a break.
Yes.
And they're going to get to Madagascar.
Yes.
Finally, they can refuel. They do refuel, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah, they recoil here. Yeah.
Okay, thank God.
Yeah, they recoil here. Because there's the thing where the Hamburg line, after they get to Madagascar, is hesitant to keep recoiling them as they go further into the Pacific. Because the Japanese have essentially issued a thing saying that any civilian vessels caught resupplying the Second Pacific Squadron are going to be fair game.
Oh, also that makes me bring to mind at some point at this point in the expedition, Mad Dog is going to send a telegraph back to Russia, and he wants basically the Tsar and everybody in the world to know that if we come across another trawler in the midst of our fleet, we're going to kill it.
Yep.
Stay clear of us.
Everybody stay away. It's also, when they're at Madagascar, he finds out the awful news that one of the officers that they dropped off following the Dogger Bank incident, Clado, has been petitioning for the creation of a third Pacific Squadron. And that they're coming.
No!
Yes.
Don't get me off this crazy ship!
Yeah, so you see, the Second Pacific Squadron was scraping the bottom of the barrel. The Third Pacific Squadron is digging a hole in the bottom of the barrel and getting the grease that's kind of soaked in the dirt under it. It is all of the ships that were too...
I'm not eating that.
Yeah, no, it's all the ships that were
back to my
too
sheets,
decrepit, old, or broken to go the first time. It is literally the ghost ships of the Russian fleet. It is literally just the crap that they still had left. And it's coming.
Is this when the bomb drops about Port Arthur?
It's around this time. Yes.
Okay, we might as well tell it to this point.
Yeah. So you know that port that they're coming out the whole way around the world to save. Yeah, about that.
Well, you see, several months of trench warfare have taken its toll on both armies, for the record, but especially the Russians. And again, remember I mentioned how that Trans-Siberian Railroad wasn't fully finished in 1904, 1905? Well, that's making life a living nightmare, because you're trying to send all of your supplies. All of your supplies have to come, at this point in time, from Moscow across this rinky-dinky rail line for the middle of bumfuck nowhere in Russia. And then you have to carry it by hand sometimes. You basically have to portage it on the backs of animal labor to get it down into Lautong Peninsula to try to supply these guys, which, by the way, that's basically cut off also. The peninsula itself is cut off by the Japanese who have marched up from the Korean peninsula. So it's taken its toll. Artillery from Admiral Togo's fleet is also making life worse.
Yes.
And eventually the Russian military inside do surrender.
Yeah, because eventually the Japanese take the heights overlooking Port Arthur, and then they can just start shelling the fleet directly.
You know about the Siege of Boston. For those that know about the Siege of Boston, Washington puts artillery pieces on the high ground overlooking the city of Boston, and basically the Japanese, that's very different history. The British surrender. They don't even really surrender. They just evacuate. They just get out of there. That's essentially what's going to happen here, albeit more bloody.
Yeah. So you have to imagine, though, that you're Mad Dog. You have moved heaven and earth.
2/3 of the world you've circumnavigated, essentially.
Yes, you have gone further than most European navies should realistically go, unless you're the British or the French. And you realize that it's all completely useless now. It's all been for nothing. Your objective is already been taken. And on top of that, a guy that you don't like with ships that you don't want to see is coming to reinforce you.
Sounds like a time to start doing some hard shit.
Yeah, so... funny thing about Madagascar is that basically all of the depravity that can be found upon Earth is made available to the men of the Second Pacific Squadron.
Penal colony.
It is a penal colony. It's a French penal colony. And a small shanty town pops up where the Russian fleet is stationed with prostitution, gambling, alcohol, and hard drugs. Straight opium right out of the Far
So
East.
they end up acquiring boxes full of opium cigarettes. Now, I don't know if it was officially Mad Dog himself. I actually think it was the crewmates smuggling it on board, to which the officers publicly put a stop to it. And by publicly, I mean they probably took all those cigarettes for themselves.
For themselves, yeah. 100%. They also decide to start collecting exotic pets like their Pokemon.
Which is why I think the cigarettes came first.
Yes. Because it turns out that Madagascar, being right off the coast of Africa, is home to a lot of fascinating wildlife and can have a lot of fascinating wildlife incorporated.
It made a surprising trilogy and franchise for DreamWorks Animation.
It did. That series kind of came out of nowhere, really.
Any of those folks descendants of veterans of the Russo-Japanese War?
Well, there weren't a lot of people. Well, Russo-Japanese War, maybe. Second Pacific Squadron, probably not.
Chris Rock, zebra descendant of a zebra that was
for the Second Pacific Squadron, maybe. Maybe one of the ones was on the Aurora. I don't know. What was a zebra amongst the
I don't
pets?
know.
I can't
I'm
remember.
just riffing at this point.
But we're talking like everything from chameleons to snakes to monkeys to an alligator to a freaking leopard. Basically anything that they could buy for love or money, they brought onto the boat.
And I want to stress that in the history of navies, that it's been known when they get to these, let's say, tropical zones, where you'll see a lot of these very odd gift givings, at least to European eyes, odd gift givings, and you'll always find some unusual creatures on board. This is where you get, of course, all your monkeys and pirate movies and stuff.
Your parrots.
And your parrots, yeah. So it wasn't uncommon for stuff like this to happen. And especially when you have guys board on a ship, they want something to entertain them, so they'll take on the craziest of pets. But usually it's a pet.
Yeah.
Not the entire island of Madagascar joining the Russian crew.
Yeah, so the chameleons became a problem on some of the ships. The problem was because of the whole chameleon camouflage thing, they had a hard time finding them once they were on board. So
they're like little Kamchatkas.
Yeah, many chameleons would die in the upcoming battle. There's a poisonous snake that you said they taught a very fun trick.
Reportedly, although this one's been disputed, they taught the snake to drink vodka. The most Russian thing to ever happen.
Yes. And
no, instead of don't step on snack, you got, whoa, man, this is trippy stuff.
Yeah.
Snack.
And there was a snack that apparently had wrapped itself around one of the main guns on board the Suvorov.
Yes.
And apparently an officer came up.
I don't know if it's the Suvorov, but there was one.
Yeah, an officer came up to try to remove it, and it bit him. I'd like to imagine it's the same snake, but I can't prove that.
I hope it is.
Yeah. You had, was it a leopard or was it like a tiger?
Dude, I don't know. They had all. The answer is yes. With it is a wildlife on the island of Madagascar or can be brought over from mainland Africa. Yes, it is on this fleet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because I think, again, I'm probably getting the ship screwed up, but I think the Aurora had like a tiger or something on it. And the crew was
actually tamer compared to others.
The crew was so terrified by this thing because, it would be stalking around the ship at night looking for food. So imagine again that
I don't advise eating the Russian
that your peasant.
They're more cold than flesh at this rate.
But imagine that your peasant conscriptovich, right? You've made it this far, and you're sitting in your bunk. You're like, I just want to go home. I want to go back to my village. I never want to see the ocean again. And you roll over, and there's just a giant cat just prowling the aisles between everybody's hammocks. And you're like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
It's like the old Geico ad with the rescue panther, sitting on the nightstand, like looking right down at the married couple in bed. That's basically what that is.
But yeah, at some point while they're here, though, following the devastating news that this whole mission has been completely pointless, Mad Dog resigns.
And Tsar Nicholas says no.
Yeah, so he resigned. The Russian government said no, and Mad Dog said, understandable, have a nice day, and then just gave up trying to resign at that point.
Well, all he can hope for now is the sweet release of death.
Yeah, Mad Dog seemed at this point, and I think from the very beginning of the voyage, is that his whole understanding of this mission was he was going to engage the Japanese and he was going to go down fighting.
There was, according to my book, there was talk amongst the Russian crew that they actually would have a fighting chance against the Japanese because the Japanese would focus everything on the Swervov as they got close, and they would try to take out the flagship immediately, and maybe they can use that to their advantage. That was like the one hope that any crewmates still have an optimism that they can take out Togo's fleet. That was what they were banking on.
And I could see Mad Dog being okay with such a fleet.
At this point, yes.
Yes. But yeah, so the other problem, of course, is now the 3rd Pacific Squadron.
Oh, no. It's the short bus of the Russian Navy.
Yes, the short bus of the Russian Navy.
Look, this is why we're doing this on another channel.
Yeah, this is not a serious historical discussion.
If you've come this far, you know that this is not a serious historical discussion, and you also know that we are not fully sober.
And they're also going to be transiting the Suez. So because of that, Mad Dog makes a decision that he's not waiting for the 3rd Pacific Squadron. He is leaving without them, and he is not going to tell Moscow what his position is.
He more rather go into the jaws of defeat than be stuck with the 3rd Pacific Squadron.
Yeah.
Let that sink in.
Now, the other problem, of course, is they're getting ready to leave Madagascar, is that the representatives from the Hamburg steamship line... What's the actual name? I know it's Hamburg something.
Hamburg America.
Hamburg America. The Hamburg America line. Basically, the Japanese have sent out a warning, like a don't come to class tomorrow kind of warning to the colliers. And they basically said that any civilian vessels caught resupplying the 2nd Pacific Squadron are going to be fair game. And they are going to hunt them down. And so, naturally, the Hamburg line's like, look, I don't really like you to begin with. I don't like you enough to die for you. And with some finagling, they work out that there will be one last resupply before they cross a certain latitude, I think. And then after that, the colliers are gone and they're on their own. I can't remember where that is in the book, but somewhere along the way, they get one last coaling, and the Hamburg line's like, best of luck. And now the 2nd Pacific Squadron is on its own.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain.
You know, on my one bottle cap, yeah, because I'm drinking out of a bottle. It's pretty cool, actually.
I like those small bottles, yeah.
We got a quote here. I wonder if this is what Nicholas II said to Mad Dog. What you're made of matters. And we also got over here what probably Nicholas II said later on. Only brewed with high country barley. Mad Dog was pretty confused with that telegram.
Yeah, that was from Kamchatka.
Speaking of which, what's the Kamchatka up to?
Really, the Kamchatka kind of drops out of my notes at this point. Does it have anything crazy going on that you can think of?
Nothing out of the ordinary for the Kamchatka.
Yeah.
Broken anchors, bad steering, UC torpedo boats.
Yeah,
you know, that
the
stuff.
usual. The greatest hits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, at this point, they decide that they're going to try to sneak their way up to Vladivostok.
Okay, yeah, so the plans change.
Yeah, Port Arthur's lost. There's no point going there.
A little bit, we talked about briefly, but I want to talk a bit more about what Vladivostok is, because it's still a very important port in the 21st century.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Vladivostok is a part of Russia, mainland Russia. Again, just to show you how massive Russia is. You know, it stretches the whole way from middle of Europe, all the way through Eastern Europe, all the way over Asia, and here we are in the Pacific Ocean. So it still is today, their major Pacific port. The problem with Vladivostok and why they wanted Port Arthur is that Vladivostok freezes in the winter.
Yes.
I don't know if it still does that today with the ice caps melting, but in the 20th century, absolutely.
Yes.
And still today, it's not the most fun place to be.
I don't think Russia is really the most fun place to be.
No, they banned anime, and they did something else in 2022.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, anyway.
So what we're doing now is he's actually put an additional mileage. Mad Dog is going to go further than he's initially planned, because he's not going to Port Arthur, which is on the west side of the Korean Peninsula. He is going around the Korean Peninsula between Korea and Japan to go to the east side of the peninsula. The reason being, up at Vladivostok, there are, let's call it a flotilla of Russian ships up there still that have been kind of stuck there for the winter.
Yeah.
But at this point, we're in spring in 1905 for the record. This is a long, long journey. We began in the fall of 1904. we're going to go into the spring of 1905. He's going to go up to Vladivostok, which by that point is gone for spring-fall, link up with whatever Russian ships are left in the Pacific, and then their plan is to go back and try to engage Admiral Togo in a battle at some point?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the Tsar still wants them to go, yes.
And remind everybody that by this point, well, since the beginning of the campaign, but especially now, Mad Dog is wanting to commit seppuku, as the Japanese refer to it as.
Yes, because Mad Dog, again, from the beginning, has thought this whole thing's doomed. And as the head officer, he knows that if he survives this battle, he's going to get blamed for everything. So he is going to die. That is his one goal in this fight, is if he can't
An honorable death that'll make a wonderful painting.
Exactly. If he is killed gloriously in combat, the Russians can't punish him, and they have to admit he might have failed, but he went down doing his duty.
This has turned into Alien Free. This is depressing. I don't want the Alien Free of history.
Yeah. Well, you know what you signed up for.
That is true.
I mean, when you had that opening speech that I gave earlier, you know,
the mother of all speeches.
The mother of all speeches. I'm gonna have like a needlepoint done of that. I'm gonna hang it up on my desk at work anytime I'm about to start a task.
My father, when he worked on an aircraft carrier, when he went into the engine room, he and his crewmates decided to paint on it. This is where heaven ends and hell begins.
Nice.
I did not see that signage when I signed up for this. Also, is what Mad Dog probably said.
Down in the engine rooms, they just have abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
Basically, at this point, you know it had to been there. You know it had been there.
Again, I think that when they left Madagascar, everybody in the fleet knew that they were dead.
Yeah. So, also, but anyway, back to what I was originally saying. So, the only way to go to Vladivostok is through the Tsushima Strait. Well, you can also go for the Korean Strait, but you have to go between Korea and Japan.
Yes.
You got one option, one or the other. Neither are good. He chooses the one that's closer to Japan.
His thought is that they aren't going to expect that. They're going to be watching the other strait, but maybe if he's lucky, because again, this is 1905. It's pre-satellite imaging. It's pre-radar.
That's not that long of a distance, though.
No, it's not.
It's not a wide gap between the two countries. This is why Japan wrecked Korea so much, because they're so close.
Yes.
People always ask, well, why was Japan able to maneuver so much for so many years when there was limited technology, at least in the eyes of the European world? Well, it's because they're that close to each other.
Yeah.
It is basically a land bridge. You just hop over in some boats to the Tsushima Island and hop over, and then you're in Korea.
Yeah. But the thinking is, though, is that maybe they get lucky. Maybe they slip by any Japanese patrols that might be looking through the straits. And then they might be able to get unmolested the whole way up to Vladivostok. It is a Hail Mary, we have no other options play. But sometimes Hail Mary plays work. Did this one work?
Humble, what's the name of your book?
The Battle of Tsushima.
It didn't work, did it?
No, it did not. But it didn't work for really stupid reasons.
And is there anything else we need to discuss before we get to the main event?
I don't think I'm missing it. Am I missing anything?
I don't think.
Yeah.
I'm just asking you just for clarification.
No. But
right.
They start going through Tsushima, and it looks like things are going to be okay. Well, it's a foggy night, and some Japanese patrol boats notice a light in the fog, and they roll up on, I believe it's the Oriole.
The hospital ship.
The hospital ship Oriole, because per international law, as a non-combatant, the Oriole must have its lights on at all times. Now, the Japanese patrol boats are looking at the Oriole, trying to figure out what's going on. When the Oriole signals, "Be careful, there are Japanese torpedo boats in the area."
Which is the rallying cry of the Second Pacific Squadron.
Yeah. And the Japanese realize, oh, this is that Russian fleet that we're looking for, huh? And then, yeah, Admiral Tojo is notified, and the Japanese fleet shows up, and the Battle of Tsushima commences.
Look, folks, we can give you a play-by-play, but you all know where this is going, and I think we'll just save you the time. And there are plenty of other, far more credible people than us
with maps,
that have done far more detailed accounts of the Battle of Tsushima, which I want to stress is one of the most important naval battles to occur.
Yes, this is one of the few, like, battleship v. battleship kind of, like,
and this
battles.
isn't wooden, because almost most battleship v. battleship actions is wooden.
Yeah.
Once we got to the Metal Age, basically everybody started getting... By that point, the gunnery range was so far that you didn't need to be face-to-face. This is one of the few times we got ironclads fighting ironclads.
Yes.
Pretty awesome. Minus the fact that 4,000 Russians are about to die.
Yes. Also, so Tojo, interestingly enough, at least according to this book, he actually went to England to study.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he studied... They have this famous, like, training ship there that he actually trained aboard. He's a huge, like, Nelson fanboy. Tojo is. And at Tsushima, he gets the ultimate Nelson fanboy
He really
dream
does.
that he gets to cross the Russian ship's T at Tsushima. Now, read out, for those who at home who don't know, what is crossing the T in naval warfare?
So you see, when you're fighting in battles, you got the bow and the stern, the front and the back, and then you got your starboard and port sides, your broadsides. And ideally, when you engage another naval ship in battle, you want the broadside to face the bow or the stern of your enemy ship. The reason is you can have all of your guns firing at the enemy, and the enemy only has limited, if not no, guns to fire in return. That is crossing the T.
Yeah, so Tojo does that.
To perfection.
To perfection. It's textbook, basically. And the Japanese shells, they're really interesting, because I hadn't heard about this before reading this book, but the shells the Japanese using are, like, incendiary.
Oh, wow. I did not hear about this.
No, so it talks about it. I can't remember if I have the name in my notes here. Let me double check. But basically, the shells that they have, there's a Japanese term for it.
Dude, you're trying to throw Japanese into my vocabulary? That's not a good idea. My followers make fun of me because I can barely speak French, let alone Japanese. I say this as I stare at a Japanese wallpaper.
Spice 'em Wolf.
Yep. I would say you're giving it away, but I've already had to send several videos of my desktop to people to edit videos. And they're like, wait, what? And it's like, just go with it.
Yeah, just don't worry about it. Oh yeah, the Shimosa shells. So the shells the Japanese were using had Shimosa, which is a picric acid.
So it's not mimosa like the orange alcohol?
No, it's Shimosa, like shitty mimosa. And it was contained with a thin-skinned, newly developed shell casing and was ignited by what became known as the Ijuan fuse. So basically, this caused the shells to explode on impact rather than penetrating like a traditional naval shell would. And when the shells hit, they threw out a wall of fire covering everything within range. So this is one of the interesting things about Tsushima is despite the Second Pacific Squadron's
you were telling me right.
abysmal gunnery throughout this entire journey, they actually score multiple hits during this battle, wounding a admiral who will become famous later that we'll touch on a little bit later in this podcast. But basically, what happened was after the battle, though, the Japanese Navy basically looked like it hadn't taken a scratch. The reason being that the Russian shells penetrated right through the Japanese ships. Meanwhile, all of the Russian ships that got captured looked like they'd been through hell because they literally had been caught on fire in multiple places.
Yes.
Yeah, from these ships.
That would explain the photographs more.
Yes. Yeah. So they had these like fancy new shells that like nobody had known about.
Oh yeah, because don't get me wrong, the Russians going in again. To Mad Dog's credit, he is at least in the Russian line, a gunnery ace.
Yes.
He got big guns. I want to say we got like 12-inch guns on top, like your main ornaments on your Borodino classes.
That sounds right. Yeah.
They're big. They can range almost 10 miles. Some of their range. It's crazy. And this is 1905.
Yeah. On paper, yeah, they should be able to.
But remember, these are the spam can class of warships where we're just like, if we put more armor on it and put bigger guns, it'll be better. What about the fact that it's top heavy? Don't worry about that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. It's never been a problem.
Where the Japanese fleet was a little more designed for agility.
Yeah. So,
and agility, for the record, normally wins in naval warfare. Everybody wants it never fails. Everybody gets the big guns out, but it's always the more agile ships that win in battle.
Yeah. What was the Polish destroyer that harassed Bismarck for like 24 hours? Because it was fast, it could just keep maneuvering around their guns.
Well, I wasn't thinking about that. I'm thinking about during the Napoleonic Wars. His name escaped me. It was a British naval captain initially, and he had a small frigate. He had a small ship, In short, it was the inspiration for the HMS Surprise and Master and Commander. And basically, he was constantly able to get in close with the enemy, and he always would win, even though his ship was a diminutive ship. That's a video for another day.
Yeah.
Anyways, the Japanese Admiral Togo completely obliterates the Russian fleet commanded by Mad Dog.
Yeah. Basically, as the fleet's getting picked apart, the Russian ships scatter. Some of them try to make the run up to Vladivostok and get picked off over the next day. I think like 2 or 3 make it.
Like a handful get away. But most of them are pulverized. If they're not sunk in the Tsushima Strait, then they're taken in the port and captured and shown to the Japanese people. Like, look what prize we got.
Yeah. I will also say,
not much of a prize. It's nice winning a medal, but it ain't nice when your medal's riddled with bullets.
Yeah. I will say the book that I read, The Battle of Tsushima, did a really good job. They actually have like an hour by hour
it is mainly about it.
Yeah. It's basically the whole last quarter of the book is the entire battle. The Aurora makes a run for the Philippines and survives.
And is still around today.
Yes, the Aurora is
If it is not at this time, it is July 5th, 2024. The Russians have not recommissioned this ship yet to fight Ukraine, correct?
As far as I am aware.
Please don't.
Please. I would like to see the Aurora someday. It might be 30 years before I can get there, but I'd like to see the Aurora someday.
It wouldn't be nice to see the Aurora, the Mikasa?
Yeah, together.
Yeah, for the record, the Mikasa, maybe I mispronounced. Maybe it's Miskasa. But I want to say it's Mikasa.
Mikasa.
It's that one. The flagship for Admiral Togo is also surviving as well. They're the only 2 ships that survive from this titanic clash in naval warfare. There's one from the Russian fleet and one from the Japanese fleet. The
Mikasa, you were correct.
Mikasa.
Yeah.
You could take and guess what happened to the Sorovov.
Yeah, so the flagship gets ripped apart over the course of the battle. And to its credit, the guns do not stop firing until the boat is underwater. The last
Mad Dog ship, he ain't getting up.
Mad Dog himself is wounded multiple times during the battle. He is eventually, when the bridge is blown off, he survives. He runs down to one of the guns and personally takes command and is overseeing firing until he's wounded again and eventually just collapses.
Look, for all of Mad Dog's faults and short of his short temper, just bad tendency to just blow up, he is one of the bravest motherfuckers you'll hear about in history.
Yes, he basically kept fighting until his body gave out under him. And when it did, some of his officers grabbed him. A Russian torpedo boat that was with the fleet pulled up alongside the flagship while it was under fire. And they didn't have any rope available to actually throw a line over and try to carry him across. Some of the sailors from the Suvorov formed a human bridge between the flagship and the torpedo boat to carry Mad Dog across so that he could maybe escape and survive this battle. Literally doing some of the most heroic, crazy stuff you've ever seen to keep the man who wanted to die alive. And this torpedo boat would later be captured, and Admiral Rozhestvensky, Mad Dog, would become a POW.
He was so close to his glorious death.
He really was. If he had died here, we couldn't say anything bad about him. It really would have been, he went out swinging. What more can you ask for?
That's not what happened.
No, unfortunately for him, he survived.
Do you want to know the numbers?
Yes, give me the numbers.
So this is poor Wikipedia, so take it with a massive, humongous pinch of salt. The Japanese Navy, Admiral Togo's fleet, are going to lose 117 dead, 583 injured. They will lose 3 torpedo boats. Yes, there were actually torpedo boats.
Yes, there were torpedo boats.
They were here.
Yeah.
Funny enough, they were in the Pacific Ocean, not the Atlantic.
Crazy.
Are you ready for the Russian numbers?
Yeah, hit me with them.
5,045 dead, 803 injured, over 6,000 captured, including Admiral Rozhestvensky. 6 battleships sunk. A coastal battleship is gone. 14 other ships are lost, including our dearly departed.
The Kamchatka got wrecked.
Yeah, it took the brunt.
It got annihilated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 battleships captured, 2 coastal battleships captured, a destroyer captured, 6 ships armed, and essentially 135,000 tons is sunk by the Japanese Navy in the Battle of Tsushima.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Yeah, and this effectively...
An entire fleet.
Wiped.
I want to stress that we always talk about the American Pacific Fleet being wiped out during the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese in 1941. A good portion of those that were sunk in the harbor, since, well, they were in a harbor, were rebuilt and sent back out, and it used both in the European and Pacific feeders. This fleet is gone.
Yeah, it's
never to come back. Nothing salvaged.
No. It's still probably there to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this basically ends the war, really. I mean,
really does.
Russia has nothing left in the tank. They have no more aces left up their sleeve. Oh, I think we forgot to mention the 3rd Squadron did eventually catch up with the 2nd before this battle. Did. Yeah, despite Mad Dog going radio silent, they somehow found them.
And zigzagging around Singapore.
Around Singapore. Yeah, we forgot that little detail. Yes, the 3rd Pacific Squadron did catch up and then also got wrecked at the battle here. Also, in the Japanese fleet is a young officer by the name of Yamamoto.
No, I wonder what he'll do.
Yeah, I wonder what he'll do. He is actually wounded by Russian shrapnel, which takes 2 of his fingers. And there is a rule in the Japanese Navy that if you lose 3 or more fingers, you have to resign, basically. If Yamamoto had lost 1 more finger at the Battle of Tsushima, World War II in the Pacific might have looked somewhat different than it did in our timeline.
Which just gives you one aspect that's, for as much as we're joking around, how freaking important the tale of the Russo-Japanese War is to world history.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. It's really... The more that I've learned about it, the more significant the conflict becomes. Because the other thing is, you got to realize in the Japanese fleet for this encounter, multiple European observers that witnessed the Japanese shrek the Russian Navy during this battle. They're going to, especially the English ones, are going to go back to England and say, hey, these big battleships, these big guns, man, that's the future. We need to build more of those.
Yeah, well, they'll learn the wrong lesson from
Yes,
that.
they learned the wrong lesson.
Well, I guess you could say they learned the right lesson, but they did it too well.
Yes. Which, of course, leads to the Dreadnought arms race between England and Germany, which is one of the major contributing factors.
Which leads to one of the biggest wet farts in naval history, the Battle of Jutland.
Yes.
Nobody wants to wreck their ships. We've spent so much money.
Yeah, there's a reason the German Navy essentially gets stuck in port for the entire war, because Kaiser Wilhelm thinks he can use it as a bargaining chip. And then at the end of the war, the Kaiserreich Marine rebels, basically. There's like a huge naval mutiny. It's a whole problem. But Hitler does the same thing during World War II. Is basically after the Bismarck gets sunk, he's like, ugh, we can't send any of our battleships into combat anymore. We're just going to sit them in harbors where they can get bombed.
Well, the Battle of Tsushima is over. The 2nd Pacific Squadron is at the bottom of the Tsushima Strait. Mad Dog is a prisoner of war to the Japanese, and by all intents and purposes, the Japanese have won the war, and we're just waiting for the treaty to be signed between the 2 parties. By the way, negotiated by Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes. Absolute Giga Chad Theodore Roosevelt.
Wins Nobel Peace Prize.
Yep, for putting an end to the war.
Russo-Japanese War. Yep. Mark that down.
Yep.
Maybe even be greater than winning the Medal of Honor a century later, posthumously.
Yep. And can you tell us, what did the Japanese win out of this war?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Basically nothing.
How did that happen?
Well, it involves a lot of European intervention, and also reminding, and Roosevelt wanting to be very friendly with the Europeans and not wanting to get into a war himself. Essentially, we go back to status quo. Not saying that the Japanese don't get anything.
They get prestige. Massive prestige.
Massive prestige that the history books have now forgotten about, sadly.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how after Europe mistreated Japan for decades, that they kind of went on their villain arc.
Yeah, because they were pissed off about the Treaty of Portsmouth.
You have a bug on your shoulder there.
Which type of bug?
It's one of the lantern bug fly larva things.
What shoulder?
You wiped off his gone.
Just keep talking.
Yeah. Anyway,
we're outdoors.
Obviously not condoning Japanese imperialism, but it is kind of weird.
Again, this is why you want to study this war, so you understand why it's going to happen.
Exactly. Understanding why something happened is not condoning it happening. Yes.
There shall be perpetual peace and friendship between the President of the United States and the King of Chosen, and the citizens and subjects of their respective governments. If other powers deal unjustly or oppressively with either government, the other will exert their good offices or being informed. Essentially, in short, back to status quo.
Yep. Tojo does actually meet Mad Dog while he's POW. Tojo.
Yes, actually, Tojo's going to intentionally go to the hospital bed of Rozhestvensky because when he hears the story of what this man's been through,
he feels bad.
Yeah, he basically hears a variant of what we've told you, a little bit more brief.
Yeah, and probably a little bit less sarcastic.
Yeah.
And he, to his credit, Tojo's like, look, you came the whole way around the world to fight, and you fought well. You did everything your country could have asked of you. And then they did, like, the bro, like, arm clasp thing, you know, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger meme.
Yep.
And not that they became friends after that, but I think there was definitely a high amount of respect between the two men for each other. Game recognizes game, as it were.
Yep.
But then, unfortunately, Mad Dog had to go back to Russia.
Yeah, he had to go back to Russia. And, well, the Tsar wasn't too... On one hand, the Tsar was understanding what he had gone through. But on the other hand, he had to keep up appearances. Especially because, man, are the Russian population furious that they have lost to, in their minds, a inferior force.
Yes. So yeah, just as Mad Dog had feared the entire journey, he became the scapegoat and was blamed for the entire thing. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's pretty much where the story ends. I think he lives for like another decade and then passes away.
Yeah, he and several of the officers do serve a short prison sentence, which really amounts to, okay, the time that you were in prison while we were waiting for your hearing, that's your time served.
Yeah. And yeah, but basically
dies in 1909.
Yeah, this
won't even see the Great War.
Yeah, this ruined his life basically. Yeah.
And that is the story of the fleet that had to die.
Yeah.
In addition to the Fubar Digital Lounge, which we're rebooting, and if you've listened to the end, we thank you so much. Be sure to leave a like button, hit the like button, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought about the tale of the Second Pacific Squadron. And hopefully we'll be back in the future with another edition where we'll sit down, drink, smoke, and talk about historical events and entertain you guys with all these mistakes that apparently us humans are unwilling to learn from.
That's history in a nutshell.
So if you want to hear any more additional history, you can go to Redoubt Productions to hear about American military history and a few other things. Apparently people really like when I talk about railroads. So if you want to hear about American military history from the 18th and 19th century, head over to Redoubt Productions.
And if you're interested in material artifacts from the First and Second World War, you can check me out at A Humble Collector. I don't even know what that
I don't know. I just heard a bunch of metal scraping. So the Japanese are moving in, and as being part of
There's
the Russians,
torpedo boats.
The torpedo boats are somehow on land. They're coming in.
They got legs.
Okay, Humble, go down the basement, get into your gun safe. Where we got to fire out. We got to fire in all directions to cover the torpedo boats.
Time to break out my Mark 14 torpedo.
Every direction, including that residency over there. You never know; they may have a torpedo boat in there. And yep, you totally won't hear us on the evening news. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep, see ya.